Good morning. From the book of Colossians, we read, "Clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." I still have this old recurring dream that comes back from time to time. I am at school in Mrs. Pomplin's first grade classroom, and I look down and realize, to my terror, that I forgot to wear pants for the day and had the double poor judgment of wearing my Ninja Turtle underwear that featured the wrong Ninja Turtle. But, of course, the bigger problem is the lack of pants in the first place. I wake up from such dreams a bit embarrassed. I'm also a little glad that it was just a dream and not an actual memory. I did forget my gym shoes from time to time. I remember doing that in kindergarten and other times, but I am proud to say that I have an unblemished record when it comes to remembering to wear pants. Our reading today talks about what we should clothe ourselves with as Christians. What we wear for clothing for different occasions has some importance in our lives. It's not the most important decision that we make on a given day, but it is something we have to think about. What do we wear for different events? Why do we choose such things? I mean, what went into deciding what to wear for church today? And I suppose those of you who are watching this online could be watching in the comfort of your favorite pair of Ninja Turtle underwear right now. We'll never know. And don't put that in the comments either. We don't want to know. There are practical reasonings for why we wear what we do. On colder days, we wear more layers. On warmer days, we don't. We live in North Dakota, so layers and jackets are important, though there are seasons where they are not necessary. My winter coat doesn't serve much of a purpose in the summer, but it's useful on the other 350 days of the year. Now, beyond jackets, we have other clothes for other occasions. Clothes for when we are going to work outside that do work outside that might be dirty, clothes we might wear to go to a funeral, clothes for resting around the house. To work in the woods, I'll wear jeans and a long sleeve shirt and gloves and try to avoid the poison ivy, the mosquitoes and ticks. If I'm cutting trees with a chainsaw, I'll add a fashionable pair of orange logging chaps. Now, essentially, our clothing acts as a protective barrier against the things of the world. Sometimes we get up and just throw something on, like if we're staying home for the day and resting. Other times, we dress up. For my wedding day, I rented a tux, and looking back at the pictures, wow, did I look sharp. My wife was one lucky lady, I'll tell you that. I haven't looked that good since then, but then again, my wife helped pick out the tux, and that was probably the last time that someone else helped make a decision on what I would wear. So maybe my problem is that I could really use some help in dressing myself. For church, I'll dress up a bit, put on a clergy collar, and then when church is getting ready to get started, I'll put on my robe. Actually, every time I put on my robe, I think about my internship supervisor, Pastor Ralph, and he passed away a few years ago. We would always put on our robes at the same time in a room just off the sanctuary, and for some reason, I can't put on my robe anymore without remembering him. In our reading from Colossians, we are instructed on what to wear or how to clothe ourselves. Not with garments made by human hands, not with fashion and style, but with character. The concern of God is not what we wear on our bodies, but how we clothe ourselves with virtue. Clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If you have any grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Unlike the seasonal or situational choices we make for our wardrobe to fit the weather or the work that lies before us, there's no season for such things that are listed in the verses, no occasion where we should not dress up in these things. Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, covered by love, are what we should clothe ourselves in every day. I kind of wonder as I look back if that's why I think about Pastor Ralph when I put on my robe. It's not about the robe, but about everything he taught me. It's about the heart of why I can stand before people each and every week and talk about Jesus. I remember he told me the story of going back to seminary one year and being asked to preach in the chapel. When getting his robe on in the back before the service, one of the professors made a big fuss about his robe not fitting right and needing to find one that actually fit, because the seminary had many such robes in all different sizes in their room for getting ready. The problem was, this was his robe that he had brought from home, and as far as he was concerned, it fit him just fine. All those years later, it still bothered him about that professor. I mean, who cares how he looked? No one came to see how well dressed the preacher was or how well his robe fit. They came to hear about Jesus. What we wear on the outside is not as important as what we put on the inside. So what does God want from us? When God looks at the world and sees it in disarray, what is his plans? What is his will? What does Jesus want us to look like as his followers? As we think past our physical appearance, what are the characteristics of what the life of a follower of Jesus should look like? Now, we might be tempted to lead with the Ten Commandments, with a strong case for morality and right living. And there is a solid argument that can be made that recentering ourselves on these things would bring positive change to the world. But as important and useful and holy even these things are, Jesus doesn't start there. Paul, devoted follower of Jesus and writer of this passage, doesn't start with God's law and commandments. He does not say to clothe ourselves with God's commandments. He says to clothe ourselves with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness, patience, forgiveness, and love. In these things that Jesus teaches, that his followers teach as well, these things that we find at the heart of Jesus and emanating from the character of Jesus, it is these things that should be our first step before we even get to the commandments. As Paul says elsewhere, if I speak in the tongues of men or angels but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Before we go out into the world and try to live right, before we even think about what to do or not to do, we must clothe ourselves with these things: compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, forgiveness, and love. So before we worry about justice, put on compassion. Before we worry about fairness, put on kindness. Before we worry about pride, put on humility. Before we worry about power, put on gentleness. Before we worry about efficiency, put on patience. Before we worry about commandments, put on forgiveness. Before we worry about anything else in the whole wide world, put on love. as we rise each and every morning, as we dress ourselves for the day. Do not forget to put on these things each and every day of your lives. That and pants. Don't forget to put on pants. Amen.